be they will be uploaded on YouTube. So we're gonna probably run for maybe 1-2 hours. So if you have to leave earlier, basically it will be recorded so you don't miss out on anything. When it comes to like questions, stuff like that, we're gonna probably do like a extensive Q&A in the end, where you can just kind of like ask questions, etc. But don't hesitate to write in the meantime. In the chat, I have the chat open, so if you have a question, I might pick it up during the presentation. But in the end also there is a possibility where we do like a main Q&A. So let's get started. I'm gonna share my screen. So we are here today to talk a little bit about the art bootcamp with me, Jacob Claussen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about me first. Then we will look at a little bit what like the bootcamp entails. And after that, depending on time, I might do a little bit demo and the Q&A at the same time. So I might do a little bit modeling, but we're going to kind of first focus on just the introduction and then a little bit about the course. And of course, if you have any questions, those are the important ones for me. And when it comes to questions, don't feel like it has to have specifically to do with the course. It can be just general questions also. I think, you have a possibility now to kind of ask uh, uh, if it's about the industry or about a specific topic in the industry or something general. Don't hesitate to ask. It's open for everything, basically. But yeah, gonna kind of go through a little bit my art timeline here, just so you can see a little bit where I come from, what I've done so far, and yeah, see a little bit how I kind of went into the industry. I actually found my first 3D scene ever, so I was looking around a little bit. So this was it must have been like 2012, I think, where I created my first 3D scene ever in university. So I went to university in the town that is called Skövde. I forgot to say, of course, my name is Jacob Claussen, and I live in Sweden. So always been in Sweden. I come from a small town in Sweden, moved to a even smaller town, which is kind of like a game mecca, I would say, called Skövde. Can actually and studied there for 3+ years. This town has kind of created studios like Coffee Stain. You have also the studio that made Valheim. You also have studio that was part of creating Peak, Landfall started there, and some other studios. So it's a kind of like a game mecca. They have a university, but most students that go there, they go into indie development. So it's a very kind of indie heavy town. And that kind of what me and some friends did during university. So we were a bit bored by just doing the school stuff. So during weekends, we started a studio basically without knowing what it means to make a game, basically. So it was a bit of a crash course in game creation while also doing the studying. So we created a kind of like a top-down brawler in stylized art style where you try to push out each other from an arena that's changing depending on which map you picked. Here I was a bit of everything, I would say. I did environment art. I did kind of like assets for for the characters. But when you are in an indie studio, you also do like HR. You go and buy coffee when it's not there anymore. So it's a very kind of like broad doing everything. And of course, like the biggest thing here was that we all were beginners. So nobody had like the recipe for anything. So a lot was basically try and error. And I would say, of course, it was very frustrating, but I usually say that if you have the chance to do like indie or game jams and stuff like that, I think it's a really good learning experience. Even if you are kind of like aiming to go to AAA and stuff like that. So stuff I did here, I still use today at work. Everything from knowing kind of like I would say all the other disciplines a bit closer because you are closer, or that you have to jump over to some. So maybe doing some concept art or doing helping out on the character side and so on. But when we released the game, I kind of felt like I needed to move on a little bit. I was also really in love with Naughty Dog, which was most environment artists. So I was more kind of environment heavy when it comes to my interest. And my big goal was like Naughty Dog after playing Last of Us. Um, so at my free time, I did a lot of kind of like portfolio work just to learn other things. And that's always been important for me to kind of working on a stylized game. I wanted to experience other things a little bit. So on my free time, I did more kind of semi-realism, of course, very inspired by Last of Us. And these were my two kind of first portfolio scenes. Um, and they were actually created after I left university. I was a little bit too afraid to open up an art station or to finish something. I felt always like I had a lot of those like 75% projects, but never kind of took anything to finish line because I didn't have an answer for that. So doing that for the first time with these two scenes kind of opened up my eyes how to kind of like go from start to finish a little bit more. I created a bit of a workflow where I had like all the puzzle pieces for creating an environment scene that I felt like would be good enough to be on my portfolio. Um, and with these, I also kind of like started to think about that I wanted to do maybe another type of graphics in my daily work. So after we released this game called Blast Out, I applied to a studio called Starbreeze in Stockholm, so the capital of Sweden. And they were working on a Walking Dead game, which was very close to Last of Us. So I knew like that I would never kind of get to work at Naughty Dog. Me as a person on the other side of the world, just starting out, I had to kind of create my path there. I felt. And I felt this game is the closest I could get to a Naughty Dog game, meaning that it's like zombies and it's somewhat like semi-realism, but it was made in Sweden and in Stockholm. So this was kind of like a big goal to get there. So I applied, kind of like had quite fitting scenes also for that kind of like world. It was like a zombie apocalypse, and I applied and got to do an art test. So usually when we apply to studios, especially when we are early in our careers, they might see our portfolios and see like, okay, these are kind of like working with what we are doing in our studio, but we never know kind of like how much has the artist done themselves, how long did it take, and all those questions are very hard to determine when you're just looking at a portfolio. I would say breakdowns help a little bit there. So doing good breakdowns can a little bit sometimes lift those question marks. And I have an example of that later. But usually I would say it's quite common to do an art test. And here the art test was to recreate like a picture. That picture was basically a close-up of a wall, and you got like a very set account of polygons, pixel density, but then a little bit free kind of will what you wanted to do. And something I did was instead of just doing that kind of piece of picture I got, I tried to create like a whole scene out of it. Still in the budget of I think this was 10,000 triangles, so very low. Back then it was like not high, but now it would be very low. And I ended up, I still remember I ended up being on 9,999 triangles. So I had one triangle left. And the biggest mistake I still remember was that I started building this what is a security cam, and that one is like 10% of the budget, but it's not 10% of the of the picture. So this became a little bit. I think it was like 1,000 triangles, and I still remember that one ate a lot of what I couldn't do. Couldn't add more after creating that one. But that's always important. We create mistakes and we learn from them basically. But yeah, they liked the art test, and I moved to Stockholm and started to work on the Walking Dead game. And working in an indie studio, everything was a bit chaotic, and we didn't know what we were doing. So for me, it was finally a time to end up in a studio where everyone knew what they were doing. I would learn and not having to kind of worry anymore and stuff like that. But of course, that's not always the truth. This game had gone through 3 engine changes, so they switched engine 3 times on this game. And when I joined, basically they had to start over again and switch to Unreal, and basically starting over almost from zero. So when I joined and asked, like, because it was just 1.5 year left to release, I asked like, well, where is part of the game? And they said, yeah, we are starting that now. So it was a little bit like a realization that not every project is smooth sailing. And of course, this was a very chaotic production, and kind of knew quite early that this wouldn't fall out well. But still, I'm very kind of like thankful ending up here because one, I got friends that are still some I even work with at this current studio I'm at now, or I kind of keep touch with. But also I learned a lot. So this was like a mid-sized studio, so I got the chance to do maybe a little bit broader stuff than if you would go to like the biggest studios. So knowing that this was kind of like not going to work out this game, like you could sense it, like the art we tried to push, and I think for like an Unreal 4 game and like doing it in 1.5 year, we did well, but we knew that this wouldn't kind of like receive well, uh, um, and that also like being in that studio kind of felt like, okay, at some point this is probably not where I want to be forever, basically. So I would say during the time at the studio, I made sure to keep working on my skill outside of the studio because I even didn't know if this game would release. And sometimes that happens. And then you might also not be allowed to show anything from the game. So some studios would basically, because they own what you're creating, right? I didn't know if I would be able to show this stuff. So I still created on my free time because I had a little bit that fear that I would ended up not having anything new when leaving this kind of like or releasing this game or trying to look for a new studio. I would say also something that I did a lot like in the past was to do stuff that I don't do at the studio. So still keeping kind of sculpturing. I went into 2D art, so I did a lot of 2D art at this time. Painted basically every day. I did one of those like every days. I think it ended up being 3 years of one painting every day, and this was basically just me really kind of falling in love with painting, but it also helped me a lot in the studio. So it could be when it comes to like explaining something or showing an idea, being able to sketch it really helped me. So I kind of saw the like value in that and kept doing it. And I still use this tool to this day when I kind of want to explain an idea, because doing it in 3D can sometimes be a bit expensive. So being able to scratch it out quickly and making it understandable was a very good tool for me to use. And also, like this was actually what I painted back then. And this scene we will see later, actually, and this scene. So some of these painting became 3D projects also. But yeah, I also, of course, made some environment scenes. So this stuff I didn't put on my art station. So that was also an important part. And I think that usually is a question that comes up is like, what should you put on an art station portfolio? And I think it's very easy to bombard it with like a lot of stuff. But I think a curated art station shows that you understand like taste, understand what the studio is after. Like you can kind of sort out the weakest parts. Of course, there will be always one weakest piece, or also when it comes to like spread, like being too spread in interest can be also a little bit dangerous. So I was always careful, like just adding all of this stuff to my art station. This kind of like went to an Instagram instead. Like I put it there instead because it's fun to kind of show stuff. But for me, ArtStation was always a place for my career, and my career was in environment art. And then, of course, like in interviews and stuff like that, then it's good to talk about this, or hinting that you can do this. Maybe you would do that in a breakdown, or incorporate maybe something in the scene that kind of shows this skill. But posting these things, I would say, like in the beginning at least, I kind of like kind of kept to a minimum. But yeah, created some scenes, and here was a lot about just kind of keep iterating on the workflow I talked about here. Like I got the aha moment how to get from start to finish, and just refining that. And that's everything from the starting phase, meaning like block out, um, a naming convention, planning, art direction, all of those things, like doing them over and over again. That's when you get like more confident. So it's not all about just one process in the whole chain of creating something. It's a lot of small things. And I would say usually in projects, I always kind of took two concepts at least that I wanted to focus on. And that could be, for example, maybe vegetation could be a concept I wanted to focus on, like this scene. It could be stylization. It could be a software. Like I want to become better at designer. But I always took like these two concepts I wanted to get better at. And they became like the main kind of reason for the project, together with, of course, adding some stuff on my portfolio. Um, but yeah, I basically released this game, and I think even early before the release, I got a call from Ubisoft Stockholm that opened up. They just opened up in Stockholm as a new studio, and they said that they heard that I love to make vegetation. Like I got a phone call and got that, and I was like, of course I do, without basically ever done vegetation. So there was someone in that studio that kind of recommended me and said, yeah, if you need a vegetation person, talk to this guy. And I mean, like I heard who worked there, like a person who is really good at the vegetation. So for me, it already felt like, yeah, that sounds super fun. But I have never done vegetation more than basically the stuff here, basically. So couple of stuff, but not that much. So I panicked a little bit before the interview, and jumped in and kind of created like a avatar scene, just kind of like create a little bit of a mind map on how to create vegetation, and being able to talk about it in the interview. I also brought this kind of with me on the interview just to show kind of like, okay, I really want this job basically. The cool thing was that they appreciated that, and this became kind of my art test. So I didn't have to do an art test. And I think that's always have helped, is being a little bit kind of like doing a little bit of the extra. And kind of like I always say that I usually put myself in the recruiter's position and trying to think like what would I kind of appreciate from an artist basically. Um, so that's kind of like what I've always tried to do when I talk to studios. And then when I landed a job, I basically start creating another one just to do it again, just so I was a little bit prepared for when I joined the studio. And joining the studio was like a complete different experience because this was like a giant studio. Like these games, you have thousands of people working on these games. And we were a support studio. So Avatar was made in Malmö, south city in Sweden, and we were supporting them with our team we were two vegetation artists basically supporting them, creating vegetation. And so it basically became a little bit more of a specialized role. So at Starbase, it was more like being an environment artist, doing the typical environment art stuff, modeling and set dressing and stuff like that. And here become a completely different thing, just doing kind of like one main aspect. But even if you are specialized, like a vegetation artist, sometimes like a project don't always need like always vegetation, or sometimes maybe other departments are running late on deadlines, or even like other games need help. So even in the vegetation team, I think we were 6 vegetation people basically, like 2 in Stockholm and 4 in Malmö. We sometimes jumped over and do other stuff. So even if you are specialized, you need to kind of like know a little bit how to do like being an environment artist basically. So jumping over to division, doing a little bit environment artwork there. And still here, I kind of like felt kind of the urge and like thought it was fun still to do personal projects, like exploring stuff that I didn't do at work. So of course here it was very like vegetation heavy. So it was nice to do something else at home basically. And one like main project I was like keen on finishing was my Harry Potter scene. So this was like the Great Hall. So it's like a 360 scene where it's the whole space that I worked on. And this one I actually started like 5 years earlier, like before I had anything, like at this time basically. I did a course where I picked the biggest scope ever, but never done an environment scene. And it was too big of a scope. I couldn't finish it, and I put it on the side. But now I've like felt after all these years, I had that workflow, so I wanted to tackle it again. But of course, went into it and saw all the mistakes. So I kind of like scratched everything and started over. But this time I could finish it. It was of course still a very large project, like being one person creating all of these assets. That's usually don't happen in a studio environment. Like you of course are a team and you have outsourcing. So it's always about being kind of smart with like scale of projects and stuff like that when it comes to portfolio. But it was a really good learning experience, and also kind of closing that chapter felt nice. Um, and after creating that one, I kind of went into more kind of like, okay, I want to kind of explore 2D art more, maybe mixing it a little bit with 3D and creating. And here we have that raccoon kind of coming back. So I actually created this one also. I don't think I have it in here. But I created like the raccoon eating eating the melon from the picnic. And this one actually did finish this year, this idea. So 10 years later, basically, it it came back. But yeah, Ubisoft was like a really nice experience. I like the only thing I was missing a little bit was like knowing the people that worked on the project. So of course, most people were a male or a person very far away. So I kind of missed the smaller size studio a little bit. Like that for me was a little bit more, yeah, getting to know everyone in the studio and working closely to the different disciplines also. I felt I was missing that a little bit. And slowly we were leaving the Avatar project because Ubisoft Stockholm were starting their own game. So I started to work on that. And for me, that became a bit of a crossroad. Like I knew that this will be a big game that will take many, many years. So I had to make a decision, like, because I like to finish games basically. So do I want to stay here and work on that for these many years, or do I want to try something completely new basically? And I always like to kind of like help like people in the team and sort things. And I tried to I became a little bit of a lead environment artist at the Starbase game because we lost the lead leaving basically the studio, so we didn't have a lead. So I jumped in, and a lead is basically the person in the environment team that kind of like oversees who is working on what and making sure that everyone is kind of like feeling good and that the project is moving forward and stuff like that. Basically, the manage like project manager for the environment team. And I kind of like that. Of course, this was very stressful because it was the first job, but now some time have gone, and I feel like I was more kind of prepared for it. And Fall Damage, which was like a newly open studio, started by some DICE veterans, had started that studio couple like a year or two before, and they were about to kind of start working on a first-person shooter, and they were a very small team, like 20 people basically, and they kind of wanted to kind of start growing the team, and they needed a lead environment artist basically. So I jumped on that project. It became kind of the focus became working with a lot of people that made the first game ever, because it was basically just the founders were from DICE, but all the other people, or most people, maybe had made one game before, but many kind of came as interns. So kind of like uh, building a studio from scratch, meaning like creating a pipeline for what we are creating, but then also yeah, kind of growing pain, like growing from 20 to 60 people and making sure that it's a kind of big jump, and making sure that that works basically. At the same time, I think it was even like the same week I joined the Vertex school actually as a mentor. So doing a little bit teaching on the side, because I've tried it in another school here in Stockholm. I thought it was fun, and a friend at Starbreeze did teaching at Vertex School. So he kind of gave my name, and that was 6 years ago, and I'm still at Vertex School. So that was kind of my starting in Vertex School. And of course, here it became much more about like project handling, a little bit less about just kind of pure art creation. Sometimes, of course, jumping into that also. But now on my free time, it was more about kind of being an environment artist, just missing that part. And I would say for the main reason was also like seeing all the students doing kind of like their portfolio scenes. I got a bit envy and jumped on and kind of created my on the side also. So these, I would say, like all my projects since then basically has always been like uh, um, that we maybe started doing a block out in class, and then that became kind of the project. So done a lot of these kind of like early block out concepts of an idea, like finding the reference and then building the first block out, and then it was lying there and just picking it up and building it, and sometimes having it as maybe an example in the course, basically like showing how I went about things basically. um but yeah, This basically went around for like 5 hours, 5 years. But then sadly, this studio got lost basically its funding. I we actually lost funding like 2 times. So it was a very bumpy road, but we were a quite close team. Like everyone were like really liked working with each other. So we kept together even when it kind of folded the first time. But then last year it kind of like completely folded. And of course, stuff like that hurts because, of course, this game never finished. We were close to the finish line, but also seeing all your friends kind of like scatter around basically. So I was a bit tired and felt like I needed a timeout. So I basically, yeah, kind of like didn't jump on a new project or anything like that. I did a little bit like freelance, helping out some studios on their kind of like pitch project and stuff like that. Most of those things are NDAs. I can't have them here, but that was a fun experience, like working those things. But then the main aspect for me was maybe exploring a little bit more other realms of game creation. So I made all my like small weekly game jam projects just to kind of start learning a little bit like programming and also like how you create games in a different mediums. So here we have like a pixelated game where I run around in a zombie world. And these were like just weekly projects just to kind of like switch it up every week and getting a sense of that. But then slowly I started to kind of like, okay, kind of want to start getting into the like into to game studio again. And I had like this scene was also like a Vertex cool block out. Started to create that on the side and finish that up basically. I have kind of like the timeline on that we can jump to later. Um, so yeah, this basically releasing that. And here is a little bit what I talk about, like adding maybe like paintings in the scene basically, instead of having it maybe in your art station. But then we also have like a stylized scene here. So I was a little bit also missing doing stylized, and here we have that tied raccoon. So that idea came back 10 years later, something like that, or 9 years later, and became a 3D scene basically. And I created this one, like also because I kind of like saw that Hazelight was opening up a role for environment art, and Hazelight for me has always been kind of like a studio where I want to work. Both in like how they work, but also I really enjoy their games basically, like style, like the style of them, but also yeah, I basically have worked on shooting games for so long, so I wanted to do something else, not do another shooter basically. So that became kind of an objective to kind of get there. So again, I kind of like thought like what would help that. Of course, maybe have a little bit of a stylized scene could help, but also showing my thought process. So not only just having finished scenes, like really letting them know who I am as a person. So I started to kind of create these, and of course these were also for me a way to kind of like just put down in text my kind of way of working a little bit, but also like helping people like that might be interested to find another way of doing a project. So I started to do like a art session blog, and this is usually a recommendation I give. So of course we have, I'm gonna just bring this up, our portfolio here, but I feel like sometimes there is a value also having kind of your blogs here, because this gives you an outlet. We talked about that before, like your like maybe not having super random stuff on your portfolio in the beginning, but the blog could be a place. So here I actually put like for example, me painting a little bit. Because for me, the like if someone is kind of like if I would look for a artist, if they have a blog, I would jump in there, and if they write basically text how they work, I would read that, because that gives like a really good indication of if they fit the studio's way of working. And I was very lucky that there was people at Hazelight reading this. I released this one day before the interview in hopes that they will see it. So I had an idea also bringing it up, of course, on the interview, but luckily the artist that was interviewing me had read it, and that became the subject matter. So we basically looked at this during the interview. So it's not always about these things like the portfolio pieces. Sometimes this can be maybe even more value for a studio. And yeah, this of course also is a project I created similar as the past, like to show stuff for students. This one is maybe also scaled up because I want to kind of like try to build a whole like playable environment. And of course, this is not a finished project yet because I landed the job at Hazelight. So I usually always, when I enter a new studio, take a pause from personal project just to keep it balanced, basically. So been there for a half year now, and now I'm starting to get the urge back to maybe revisiting this. So the idea is to start going back to this project. And this project is actually like a real place. So it's a Swedish painter from the early 1900s who has been a great or a big inspiration for me when it comes to art, because my family comes from a close place from here. So I always heard his name when I was a kid, and he's always been kind of a bit of an inspiration for me. And the idea here is to almost like put Assassin's Creed in Sweden in the early 1900s. So that's kind of like my idea of this project. So I want to kind of create basically playable environment. So being able to run around and walk around in this kind of like scene, and of course trying to also keeping it kind of like historically accurate and stuff like that. So I actually went this summer to this place. I haven't put that actually yet in my reference board. So all of these references are just Google. But now I also went here and took a lot of close-up photos. So that's kind of the first task I have to now when I'm going back to this project, is to sort all of those kind of reference I took. And I took videos also, like walking around there, because it helps a lot, just can get a sense of the space and how large it is and stuff like that. We can jump in later to this project, and I can show it a little bit in a reel how it looks basically under the hood. But yeah, that's a little bit the history of me. I wonder if there is any questions about this from anyone. Feel free to type in the chat in that. Or let's see. Yeah. So we will jump over now to talk a little bit about the bootcamp. And basically we have 14 weeks where you will work with me and the rest of the class basically. And the idea of the bootcamp is a little bit that everyone works on their own projects, learning about not only about like creating just an environment scene, but also like kind of like pre-production, working cleanly, but also like finishing a project basically. So it's going to be a little bit about how to set up a project and create kind of like a clean workflow around a project. And of course, everyone will work very differently on themes, meaning that maybe someone will do a fantasy, someone will do maybe just a building that exists in today's area, or maybe someone will do sci-fi. So that aspect is completely free. Like you pick what you want to work on. But then we basically have a timeline we try to follow. And here basically I'm there to guide basically when it comes to yeah, where to go next, basically. I would say the main aspect of kind of the beginning is to basically kind of like create a pitch deck about your project. So I have Chris here, a student, because I think this is a very good example of from start to finish of a student project here. So when it comes to the pitch deck, the idea here is to, before kind of like even starting a project, thinking about what we are creating. Because it's very easy that we are just kind of like jumping in, start modeling. It goes like 4 weeks and we are tired of it. So I think like just sitting down a week and really thinking about the project kind of mitigates that a little bit. We're making sure that we are thinking about like the scale of the project, but then also we are creating a little bit of an identity of the project already. So I think nowadays, just posting a screenshot of an environment scene is maybe not enough. Like nowadays, we want to kind of like maybe see also a little bit of a clean treatment of the portfolio piece, meaning that maybe you have kind of like a set font for the whole project. You work with like a distinct color, almost like art directing a little bit your own project, and doing that already in the pitch deck by kind of like picking a font here, having a name for the project. All of those things basically makes the project become a little bit more streamlined. And it also like makes it feel a little bit more kind of like a real project, I feel like. So basically just creating a quick elevator pitch about the idea of the project. And then basically just the narrative pillars for the project, like what is this project telling? Because that's also very nice later when you kind of always kind of are stuck kind of going back to this and like, okay, what was the goal with the project in terms of the narrative? Like, is that still being kind of pushed? I think also like a pitch deck like this is very nice if you're seeking feedback from several people, kind of giving this to those other people, give them kind of a chance to understand kind of your goal with the project, just seeing kind of like a real screenshot, basically, like having this and then like looking at your screenshot probably gets you better feedback, basically, because then they can understand, for example, what your art direction goal is. Um, and this is like a big one. I think finding an art direction from existing games really helps you kind of like not wandering around when it comes to what you're creating. So it's very easy to just kind of like jump on and then saying, okay, I create a realistic game, but what does that mean, basically, or a project? And I think having a game to lean on, both in terms of kind of like seeing where you need to push stuff in terms of fidelity, but then also when it comes to finding out how to create stuff. So of course, in environment art, we can create stuff very differently. If it's a stylized game or a realistic style, it will be very different kind of workflows, but also in terms of what we perceive as realism, there will be very different workflows. And if you go to someone maybe asking, okay, how do I do like go about the texture on the wall, for example? If they just see your kind of reference of a wall, it would be hard for for a mentor or a person that giving feedback to kind of give you a good answer if you don't like say, okay, I want to create it in this certain style, basically. I would say also like a big aspect is like on ArtStation nowadays, games give you a lot of great breakdowns. So you will always have great breakdowns that can give you that information. And then creative pillars, similar to narrative pillars, I would say, is that you basically find those pinpoint words to kind of drive your project forward. And then a little bit like I talked about before, always having kind of like a goal with your project, and that can be everything from just making your first portfolio scene or learning vegetation, or it can be modularity, like certain aspect, because that can also tell you like if the project becomes too big, and it doesn't entail like the goals that you have, maybe we can take those things away. So that gives you kind of like a way to kind of like know what is important when you're trying to figure out the scope of the project. And that would be the next thing, is like creating a plan B, or like a tier list of a plan basically. So we never know. Like sometimes we maybe run out of time. Let's say we are very tired of the project, or we need to release the project. Is there a way we can work with it that we can kind of like simplify it? So in the beginning, maybe we had an idea of creating like a giant project, and then maybe like cutting away stuff can help making it in time. The idea with this kind of exercise is also thinking about like how can we simplify an idea, just in terms of just the plan A, like the main goal. How can we simplify like an idea to its core to make it kind of like feasible to create? So for example, from the get-go, Chris here cut away quite a large portion to make it kind of like sustainable to create. So not having to create that extra house here, because everything adds time. And especially if we are trying to aim for like industry fidelity, it's better to kind of like try to create it in a smaller portion and making that well, basically. And then the big one is timeline. I would say this one is usually there to kind of learn from. Like I think it's very hard to set the timeline when you do it for the first, second time. But it's very nice to kind of do it and kind of like bounce around that with a mentor basically. But then also like later when you're done with the project, maybe going back to this and kind of like analyzing, did I like what took longer basically, and maybe going back and understanding that maybe okay, modularity was a bit of a bigger aspect for me than I thought, and remembering that for the next time. And that just makes you a more kind of like I would say a more senior artist starting to think about these things, basically. And I was just wanted to show kind of like how that kind of became kind of like from start to finish here from Chris. So creating that kind of clean block out to color coding the block out in terms of like values, and then setting the first lighting path. And then the long creation of basically setting materials down and just kind of like start kind of working on all the aspects of the image until it's kind of like coming to the final step basically. And usually this one is the hard part, I would say, in environment art. It's very easy to end here basically, or maybe even here, because it's like takes time. It's not fun, like because it's like feedback, but it's here where you can kind of push things to the final aspect. And I think Chris did like an amazing job when it comes to that, taking it to the final stage basically. And he's already jumping on his next project now, and setting it up in a similar way, basically, where we're kind of creating a pitch deck and building around that to really think about his next project. And I think also the cool thing is that he's also thinking about with his next project, how can that, like, because this is his first environment scene on his portfolio, like what next project can be a good difference basically. So of course, typical thing would be to do an interior shot, but maybe also like what can also be added to that to show like another skill set of him. I'm not going to spoil what he's creating next, but I think he's planning on start creating a blog around that project. So it's probably going to show up eventually. But yeah, and I would say the whole kind of term in general is kind of structured that way, basically. So we have a couple of weeks in the beginning where we basically just build a strong foundation for the portfolio piece, meaning that we're going into creating kind of like a clear plan what we're creating. We're building a clear block out, knowing where our camera is set, and setting our first lighting pass, basically. Because if that shot is looking good already without any color, just grayscale block out, then we can just kind of add that in our mind that this will eventually become kind of this. And I would say also, like when it comes to like scale and stuff like that, usually during a project, of course, things will change. Like for example, camera setting. So Chris went with this aspect ratio because the inspiration was that aspect ratio, but then later kind of turned it into more of a game shot. But the kind of main kind of block out has kind of like stayed the same from the kind of beginning, and finding that very early on can always be tricky. But I think this has, like, for me also helped the most when it comes to creating portfolio scenes is to kind of just making sure that your ground idea is feasible and working well. Then we move over a little bit to kind of like working with like proxy, or can call this like previous modeling. And the idea here is to basically just create kind of like all the assets in the scene in a very simple way. So I have a example of that here from one of my scenes. So this is quite common nowadays to, instead of like sitting and kind of like modeling kind of like a chair and finishing it and then placing it, we basically just box modeling everything, and we built kind of like the set dressing in the scene, because then we have like a set number of what we need to create. Like we can put this in an Excel sheet, and we know exactly we have maybe 50 props to make. We can time box that and say that's completely impossible to create for one person, maybe in the time we have planned. So either we need to create, like, extend the deadline, we need to add more time, or we need to scale back the amount of props, because we want to be careful scaling back the fidelity. Like we will always want to kind of keep the fidelity, I would say. So it's either time, adding more time. I mean, one thing we can do is also like being smart about things. So we can, like, not lowering the fidelity, but maybe working simpler with some aspects. And the typical thing is like backdrop stuff, like stuff in the distance could maybe be modeled in a simpler way. Can you just talk about one example, what I mean with that? So with this project, this structure here doesn't have any texture. It's just kind of like a grayscale and just box modeled. So it doesn't have any high poly, low poly. It doesn't have any UV map or anything. It's just silhouette. So that's kind of one way of being kind of smart about like for what it is, creating it basically. So not always kind of creating everything to the fullest extent if it's not needed. I think another one is like modularity. It's very nice to already at this spot kind of like knowing what is the modularity of our scene. And if that word is maybe somewhat of a new word, I'm going to just show an example of that. So that would be basically to plan out our puzzle pieces for a building. And with modularity, we try to always keep those in a set metrics, meaning that these are kind of following the grid here. So it's a 4x4 meter. So we can switch these out with each other, basically. And the reason why we do this is like instead of building the whole building like this, let's see, like this whole building as one chunk, we build them in small modular pieces. Because if I build this window piece here, these will update also. So like all the windows will update that is this size. That's a modular piece basically. So we only have to work on one to update several basically. And then of course like there is a reason for better rendering and stuff like that. But I think the main aspect is that it's a very kind of nice way to kind of like speed up work, not creating everything in one big chunk. Um, and then basically looking back at what we have created, like in terms of a blockout and what we have in front of us, and just structuring that up and putting down a plan basically. So almost like going back to our project pitch and looking over our timeline and seeing kind of like is stuff feasible. And it might seem that we have wasted a lot of time, but I think this is usually where we can save a lot of time, like building a strong foundation and working with that strong foundation. Or else it's very easy that it's going back and forth in not knowing what you're after and stuff like that. And the cool thing is also I feel like start doing this stuff prepares you a little bit more for the industry, I would say, because we don't work that much in this realm, like finished art. A lot in video game creation is this basically, like early conceptual blockouts, being able to run around in these, and knowing if it's fun and cool to run around in them. So this is a big part of creating in the game industry, basically. Um, because this is a much faster way to know, like, are we in the right direction? It's also a faster way to kind of like say no and completely change it, basically. So that's the whole idea of kind of blocking out and figuring out things in a simple way, but then knowing that this with like a coat of paint will look awesome. And I would say after that, there is a couple of weeks of just pure kind of production. This will always kind of differs a little bit depending on what type of project you work on. So if it's maybe a sci-fi game, like a sci-fi environment, then maybe you would be much more like trim texture heavy compared to maybe like a stylized, I don't know, stylized next gen game where maybe you would sculpt a lot and just high poly, low poly bake it. Or it might be more of a fantasy shot where you maybe or like an outdoor shot where you work with vegetation, then that would be part of it compared to maybe an indoor scene in a sci-fi setting. And of course we set lighting very early, like figuring out the lighting, but I feel like it's very hard to kind of just pinpoint lighting very early on. So in the end, we go back and look over lighting again with all the assets we have. So we do like another lighting pass and really trying to push that until we are kind of like going to final touches. And here is where we kind of like look at like the smallest detail and saying kind of like just writing up a list of things we should kind of like fix before we can say it's done basically. And then I would say it's always good to have like a cinematic video of your scene. There is like two reasons for that. One is that you will see stuff in movement, so it will feel more like a video game rather than just a screenshot. You will also see texture, foliage, and all of those things. They will have movement to them. So if you like move with a camera forward, stuff will reflect in the light and stuff like that, and it will feel much more like you will get a more understanding of like the texture work. I think also like as human, we are more kind of like I don't know, get more hyped seeing a video than just screenshots. And then of course also, and we have both screenshots and video to kind of like put out there. So when we're done with a portfolio piece, it's all like we spend so much time. As I see it very often that we just kind of put out one ArtStation post and not anything else. I feel like we should be proud of what we created and be much more vocal about it. And that means kind of like maybe doing like a LinkedIn post with the screenshots of the project, and then maybe also a LinkedIn post of some breakdowns, like how was it created, like what was every step, maybe something that can even help people that are starting out could be a nice thing. It could be how did you went about creating a certain aspect, or it can be that video we created. And usually videos are always something that people kind of stay and look at. So it doesn't hurt to have that. There is also a possibility, that's usually a little bit depending on the person, but there is an art test that you can try and see a little bit how that goes on. Seeing a little bit like more of a open art test and learning how that will kind of be in a studio basically, because it can be a bit scary kind of going out in the wild and then doing an art test for the first time and never done it before. Um, and then a big one, the big one here also, I feel like it's very nice to just let the scene rest a week. So usually before I release a scene, always I wait 1 or 2 weeks. I look at it again, and I know it's very hard. Like you want to just put it out when you're done, like you work so much. But I think there is a great value if you don't have like a very important deadline to just wait 1 or 2 weeks, go back to it, because then you basically see it with new eyes. You can see some stuff that maybe would be nice to fix, and you can make a decision if you want to fix those or not. And that's have helped me a lot, kind of like just letting a project rest for a little bit and then going back and seeing it with new eyes. Because it's very hard working on something for a very long time and seeing it being the same over and over again, and not kind of like seeing mistakes anymore. And then of course we are at 14 weeks. But something I like to do with my classes is that creating kind of like a bit of a structure where we can meet up still. Whoops. So basically having 4 reunions where we meet up again. But these will be like weekly, these classes, but then it will be once a month basically. And the idea is that some might not finish in 14 weeks for maybe personal reasons or something like that, or yeah, life happens. And the idea is to give some padding here to be able to keep working on your scene. But here we put them like a month apart, so there is a bigger padding basically. And the nice thing is that we still have our Discord. Basically, we're creating kind of everyone creates a Discord channel where they put their project in, where feedback can still happening like during that time. So this is more when we do meetups. I think it's also very nice just to meet up with your class again, just getting kind of like seeing all the people that you worked with together for 14 weeks and just hearing their stories and being inspired or helping out basically. So it can be also about maybe job hunting and stuff like that. So let's say you are finishing this project here, but you're a little bit unsure what to do next after that, basically. So the idea here is to have, yeah, so like a set date to kind of like lean towards, like maybe you're starting a new project, and it can just be nice to have like that kind of date to aim for. Or you're doing going into an interview and you're a bit unsure how to prepare or what it will entail, and this can be a very nice place to kind of discuss that basically. So that's a bit the layout of the bootcamp, I would say. Any questions about that when it comes to the bootcamp? And there is no bad questions basically. So, and you don't have to speak. You can type the question also if you have any question. Seems like everything is crystal clear there. Um, what do you mean with the retakes? You mean with these reunions, if there's any extra charge? Like with these four extra, if that's an extra charge? No, they are like that's just me doing them basically. So they are happening basically outside of the course, I would say. Yeah, so basically the course will run to I'm not like 100% like because Vertex school closes basically. So if I remember correctly, there will be like a one more pickup week in January, which I think is great because that gives you extra time to work during the winter break. So it's like basically extra 2 week of padding basically. And then the reunions would basically start. I usually put them a month apart basically. So I do those with all like every class I have, and basically meet up with them basically. And they are completely optional. Like I record them, so if you can't make it or you're for some reason can't do it, they will be watchable also. And these classes will be basically 2 times per week, basically like the normal class. So we will meet up on Monday and Wednesday, basically. Yeah, so like I would say with this course, the only thing I would say is that I think it's good to have some sense of 3D modeling because it's going to move in a bit of a pace, basically. But you can, of course, always, let's say, you still want to do it, but then maybe um, build the kind of an expectation of that, basically. Because the idea with like this kind of boot camp is like you have maybe done a couple of scenes already, or maybe done your first environment scene, and basically boosting a little bit the idea of how you can work around 3D basically. But of course, there will be some videos about kind of like basic modeling and stuff like that. But like I said, uh, uh, um, I usually suggest to somewhat know modeling and maybe Unreal to get the best outcome, I would say. And when it comes to like modeling, it's like like most videos are Maya, but I'm like at work I use Blender, but I'm both Maya and Blender, so I usually get that question, like which software to use in the course, and you can use any modeling software, but when it comes to me, it's Maya or Blender where I kind of can give the best tips and tricks, basically. Yeah, so that's basically idea of the reunions, basically. That we can look over those things, basically. Uh, I have a base, so the idea is to have it a little bit in week 14 because not everyone will show up later for the reunions. But for whoever joins the reunions, the idea is that I basically whatever you need help with, I help with. So it doesn't have to be 3D related if that's an interview or if that's your kind of like your resume or your personal letter. That can be the topic for that also. But yeah, I would say like you don't have to wait for the reunions when it comes to like a resume or review. Like that's why having kind of like the setup of Discord threads is very nice because then you can just write there and I will see it and answer in a day or two, basically. Any other questions? Seems like everything is clear. So I think we have a. Do you mean like a diploma or something like that, Rachel? Like with awards. So I mean, I don't have like a diploma for the course. Like for me, like my goal is to help whoever does it to become basically better at environment art. And I think for me, the goal is not like me putting that on paper. It's you having something on your art station that you can be proud of, and that you get like a sense that you can kind of like apply to studios with, basically. So I will be there to be honest opinion because I've of course done recruitment at studios before where basically you need to be when it comes to creating something to get that job, basically. Then of course not everyone is after that. Like sometimes maybe it's you are after just learning 3D for any reason, and if I know that, I will of course focus on that aspect. So a good example of that is like I've taken 2D art courses without trying to become a 2D artist. So that's what I mean with that, basically. Um, Seems like everything is clear. So I would say we have like little bit time left. So I might jump in a little bit in my current project and show that a little bit maybe. Um, whoop. And then whoever wants to ask questions can just fill with new questions. Basically, I have the chat open. Okay, so I updated just. I might have to jump into the old. This might be. I just moved this project to 5.08 because this was on 5.6 before. So my main goal with this project is to learn the new nanite vegetation system. And then, of course, like I said, building a bigger project, basically. So in the past, my project has been a little bit more kind of like a set, uh, more of a cinematic set camera and stuff like that. And this one is more like a playable demo almost. Um, but yeah, it's kind of working like how we would work in a studio, I would say. Not every studio works the same, of course, but blocking out like a place. So we can turn on the block out and take away the detail block out here. So I have these levels basically to jump between the different versions. I would say I do this mainly to be able to show it But the level system is very nice if you want to kind of like hide props and stuff like that, or hide different lightings and stuff like that. But yeah, the idea is to basically block out the space, feeling the sense of distance between stuff, and if it feels nice. And the idea, of course, with this project is not to create like every interior and stuff like that, because that would need a whole team. Uh, because the main focus is the kind of garden here. So my next step is here to start blocking out the whole garden with all the vegetation here. So I'm going to kind of block out the whole vegetation. So we can open up my meter board here. And here we have all the vegetation. So I was very lucky. There was someone did like I'm not sure if I have that document here, but someone wrote a whole document about the garden of this place when this artist was living. And I would say that's for me a lot of environment artwork is to do this research and go a little bit extra mile. So I read through that article, like that kind of paper, and got kind of like all the vegetation that grew on this facility or this garden, basically. So I'm going to just pick up the questions here. Yeah, so and when it comes to like the leveling system, like they have like a new like a world position system, which is their new system. But I would say like even in like newer games, we still use this workflow because it's so kind of like just flexible. So at my past studio and current studio, this is still what we work with. So especially when you work in team is very nice because then I can sit on my art levels without if a designer sits and work here or a programmer and they do stuff. Of course, we couldn't work on the same file because that would break. So that's kind of like also, but I think just for personal projects, it's nice to be able to like hide stuff basically. And when it comes to like how like recommended time for a portfolio piece, it's like how long is the rope, you say? I think like it's a very hard question to answer because it's depend on the goal with the project, like the portfolio piece. So let's say you're doing a prop, that might be a lower time than maybe a small room compared to maybe a big environment. And then on top of that, it depends also what is your kind of time frame in terms of maybe you have like until next summer you want to kind of like have a ready portfolio. Then maybe the question would be, do you want to just have one piece or two pieces? And then you would look at the time you have left until summer and like, okay, this is how much month I have and like split them between or stuff like that. So I would say it's so many kind of aspects that count into that. But I would say my scenes has been everything from 1 month, 1 to 3 months to my Harry Potter scene that I started and I finished it 5 years later. But I would say what I see usually is that people get a bit tired of scenes. So it's always better to kind of like aim for a shorter time frame if you're not knowing that you are a person that would stick by it and stick working with it. Because it's one thing to start blocking out a scene and looking for reference and concepts. It's fun, but then when you are at month 3 and you're still working on it and it's like small aspects, maybe the water you're trying to like make look right, it's not working. That's when stuff is starting to get hard, and that's like when it's kind of important to kind of stick with it basically. um no problem, Victor. um so basically I would say Chris is an example of basically our term 3 is kind of like the same layout. So that would basically be a little bit how a project would go about basically. Um, um, I can pick up some other ones. Let's see. So I'm gonna bring in some here. So another one, which is an ongoing project, would be so we have Christina here. She's not done yet, but also a lot of vegetation basically. But the same idea here basically. Um, uh, Blocking out basically, and then kind of working on it. And of course, here is kind of where the tricky time starts, basically, kind of finishing it up and stuff like that. Uh, um, but that's basically what's needed, is like that extra push, basically, to go from when we are basically here to like the final stage. And I would say the time frame between usually like it doesn't look like it's much basically going from here, but I would say this is a little bit the reason why I have added the reunions basically, because I know that sometimes kind of it's starting to get hard here, and it's just needing that time basically, together with like feedback, of course, and being able to handle like work on that feedback. It's when we need kind of like that extra padding. But it's always, of course, like if someone has worked on a project before, it's a bit easier, or bigger scope, a smaller scope, basically. No problem. It's mainly because I haven't asked these students to show stuff, so I'm a bit kind of. I feel like I should ask before I've kind of Chris have given me the blessing to show stuff. Um, but um, I can show some other Finnish stuff. I feel like that's a little bit more kind of like. So we can jump to. I think I have Jan somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, Jan we have also. Uh, so working kind of like in the same way, like and I think it's always fun to see kind of like the camera doesn't change that much, but the context is there now. And of course, like this is a little bit like that our old drawing. Like this is not just kind of like jumping over here. There is a lot of try and error here, and I think that's a big aspect for when it comes to environment artwork. Like it's like this path that is kind of like the tricky one, and that's why I think it's so important to pick like a topic that you are keen on creating basically. And that can be a painting like Chris found, or Natasha lives in Berlin, so she did like a zombie apocalypse in Berlin basically. And I would say like they started to work at places, and I would say it's not long. It's not going to be long before Chris work in a studio. I'm quite certain. But that's also why I still meet these students, for example. Like keeping in touch and having those reunions. And for me, it's also fun to know how it's going after, right? But yeah, let's see. I think that was all the questions. I hope that answered your question, Paul. But I would say like scope of project, it always depends also on your previous experience. So maybe if you're doing like modeling for the first time, then I would maybe recommend like doing a small room and just understanding the basics of modeling. But then of course, like the question is like then maybe it's going to be more focus on learning kind of like the basics rather than maybe creating finished art for a studio, because uh, um, like a portfolio piece needs to be something that would be in a game to be a finished portfolio piece that you can enter the studio with. So that's always a big aspect, and that's why projects takes time to do, basically, because we're doing it completely alone. Basically, we're compared to a studio where you would work uh, with the basically outsourcing or other artists where you can get help from, basically. But yeah, let's see. I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like, and I would say like this might seem very extensive. I wouldn't say that this is kind of like the scope you should go for. This is, of course, me done a couple of scenes before, but I think there is a value of at least having an organized reference board together with the amount of reference you need for creating something. So one example is maybe having kind of like this building, finding pictures from every angle. So when even doing the block out or the more detailed block out, there is always something to look at instead of maybe every time you model something, look for it. So I like to really build like basically my visual library early on in the project and having that. So I haven't almost started the vegetation yet, but I have basically organized all the vegetation here, but also kind of pinpointed which vegetation should be created. So that's basically the next goal of this scene. And like I said, it's been paused for a half year now, but I'm planning on kind of picking it up now again in the fall, basically. I can show also maybe another tip I would give for anyone that's building something is to let's see, is to create a gym. So basically have a space where you put like all the props. So a lot of the props I have created so far is in this building, basically. So this is that painter's house. So the goal is to kind of have a rendition of that, basically. That's the only interior we'll do, basically. But every prop here is kind of like that proxy model workflow. So the nice thing is that I have basically all the props here. I have the names. I even have them put into a list here. And I would say this is like more maybe what you would see in a studio. This can always be simplified, and you will probably not see the amount of this in a like a personal project. But it can be nice just to have a list of all the props to know if it's even feasible to make this, basically, or that you maybe need to simplify some aspects of something. And to be able to kind of like have an overlook of all of that, usually we create something called an asset gym. And the idea is to basically be able to kind of look at the art. And I would say this maybe also is especially when you work on games, being able to look at stuff from all angles in a natural lighting is important. For a portfolio, maybe I would say focus on making it look good in your camera angle. But then later when you present work, it can be nice to kind of have it kind of like listed like this to show kind of like all the assets behind the project. So here we have starting the vegetation blockouts basically. And even those, I always kind of create these kind of simple versions of them to be able to place them and know basically when the scene is enough set dressed basically to look interesting enough. And then when it comes to like a building, basically going from kind of like a simple block out. So this is like just kind of like a complete building modeled, define the proportions and stuff like that. Is to start creating, of course, the final version. And that's where we put in like the modularity, like the puzzle pieces to build this. And what I like to do is for the longest time, this didn't have any texture. So basically working in grayscale and just focusing on detail basically and modeling most of the details that are needed to be modeled. And then after that, starting to go in with the texture basically. And these I usually set up in a very simple manner, like just creating flat colored tileable textures just to kind of like figure out the scale of the texture. And then when that is completed, I do it basically on every building. So I basically pull the whole project together. So I don't just sit with this building and finishing it completely and then have all these kind of left. Kind of pull everything together. And the nice thing is that then everything has like a file. So all of these textures has a file I can jump to, like a designer file I can jump to and work on, and it's kind of like connected to Unreal now. Same with all of these props. They have a modeling file where I can jump to, and they will just update basically. So it's basically just to create a somewhat of a structure. Great question here. What's your thought on Nanite project? Would it be equal value to traditional workflow environment? Let's say if you're trying to get a junior position at a AAA studio. I would say I think there is a value of maybe not going nanite with your first project or maybe keeping it at a minimum. But I would say also depends on the studio are after. So let's say you are kind of like super keen on working at like CG Project Red, of course, Witcher 4 is using nanite. Then I would maybe argue that it's of value to kind of use it in your project. But I would say also with nanite, you get, of course, a bigger technical hurdle because there is less out there about how to solve things. And of course, also nanite is not completed yet. It's still something that studios are trying to figure out. And it's also a reason why not every studio is jumping on nanite. We are not using nanite at our studio. I know that, for example, Embark with Arc Raiders, they are not using nanite, but they're using Unreal. So you or like let's say Battlefield, they are not even they are not even on Unreal, so they're not using nanite. So the idea there is maybe that if you're using nanite, you're kind of very focused on a specific place. The other thing I would say with nanite is, of course, like fidelity can be raised quite high with nanite. But the question is, when you work on your first project, will you be able to kind of get to that point where nanite is value? Meaning that, like maybe it's hard to kind of grasp kind of like how far it needs to be taken, basically, in the fidelity way, basically. Because the value of nanite is, of course, that everything becomes kind of like instead of textured and faked, everything becomes kind of like everything has geometry, and of course it will look more next-gen-y, but the question is, at a starting place, can you get there, especially if you're creating kind of like a giant scene. But maybe a halfway way of doing it would be to maybe, let's say you're doing like a organic scene, to maybe make the floor nanite, but the rest not nanite, and keeping kind of like old school workflows, like more non-nanite vertex painting and stuff like that. Because all of those things are not as documented, so there's that kind of value of kind of using old workflows. So we have basically gone through, welcome saying, we have basically gone through all of that, but the nice thing is that this is recorded, and I think it's going to come up probably tomorrow, or if it's not already up. Uh, so you can just watch back basically, and get all the information. So we basically went through the whole bootcamp basically. But maybe do you have any kind of specific questions about it? And for you who or anyone, you can always reach out to me if you have any questions that you maybe forgot to ask during this time basically. So feel free to write on ArtStation or LinkedIn or something like that, and I'm happy to get back to you. What do you mean with the use, like how many like triangle counts and stuff like that?
Like using triangles instead of quads while making modular pieces or any pieces.
I feel like it don't have to think about that, because when you import something to Unreal, everything becomes triangle basically. Um, the reason why we don't model in triangles is because the mesh becomes cleaner, so it's easier to work with. So usually we tend to keep it at just being 4 points instead of 3 points, basically. And I would say the main reason is that uh, um, you model faster that way instead of modeling in triangles. Um, I actually have like I do these collections. So I have like a wireframe collection here. Um, so I think a good example of that would be like the Last of Us one here. Um, so usually like environment modeling is very clean usually. Um, and these extra edge loops are there for vertex painting basically. So being able to paint between two tileable textures is kind of like the reason why they exist here basically. But you can see there is no like sometimes we put triangles at some places just to kind of kind of close off like these circles and stuff like that here. But in the big general shape, we try to kind of keep it at these basically. Uh, I can link this wireframe collection. So these are from like different games. You can see kind of like how the triangle count looks like here. Um, so usually still things are kept at like a detail level. But sometimes you can see this, and I would say like with organic shapes, usually it can be just picked directly from ZBrush and then maybe just decimated or remeshed basically with like triangles already there, because then you can keep it at a lower amount. And that's usually what we do when it's like organic shapes, like these shapes also. They would usually be triangled because we use like, if I jump in here, I can take actually the monkey head here. So we would use the decimate basically. We can do it like this instead. Let's see. So I'm going to subdivide it. So let's say this is sculpted. So, and then maybe this is like a statue we want to bring in the game. But we want to kind of like make it a little bit more low poly, and we would just decimate it instead of sitting and creating it from scratch, basically. But of course, we want to kind of keep the silhouette. So maybe to this the point, basically. And then this would bake to this, basically. And then, of course, this, let's see, if I apply this now, this would look like this, basically, in the engine. So here you would have it triangled. So that's more of these kind of organic shapes, usually. I hope that answers your question. And when it comes to modularity, I think it's a quite big topic, but the idea is to basically, I talked about it a little bit before, but basically you want to limit the amount of work you put on each asset. So if you have like you have like a archway like this in a big structure, it's nicer to just work on this arch instead of like 5 arches. And you work on one, and then basically all the 5 updates in the engine, basically. Um, and that way you basically just cut the work basically in a fifth of the amount, basically. Then there is also some render stuff that sometimes also helps out. Like it's also an optimization reason in certain engines. But then, of course, like every studio does modularity in different ways, and that's why I have like this collection where I basically save all the modular workflows from different studios. This example I really like from Assassin's Creed, where they show kind of modularity in action. So you can see like every piece is kind of like this, kind of like same size, and then you can switch them out like this on the fly. So it becomes a very kind of like dynamic way of building buildings. And then of course, if it's like a giant open world game, it makes it much more flexible to create a lot of different structures, basically, because every structure is kind of using the same assets, but they are built in different layouts, so the player will not see the difference. And then, of course, we can put props on top of it to hide it a little bit more, that it's kind of just the same assets happening over and over again. I hope that answers your question there. Any other questions? Um, one thing I can do, because sometimes I get asked about these collections. I put them all in. Let's see where I did put that. I put all in one document, so I can kind of link all the links here. So I basically made one of these collections for every subject matter in the game industry. And it's just like, I think you learn a lot by just studying stuff like this. That's how I learned a lot. So for example, I have also, my favorite one is probably vegetation. I think this one has like 400 projects, but it's just a way to kind of like just study how other people do it. And then of course you pick from different people, and different workflows and stuff like that, and creating your way of doing it eventually. But I think in the beginning, it's so important to study and learn from these. But yeah, I'm gonna put all of those here, so feel free to save them basically. And I always update them basically. Um, it will be on Vertex School's YouTube channel basically. So I think they upload it, yeah, a day after usually the recording, like a day or two after. You can also find like old videos of me, like if you just type my name, where you can see a little bit presentations and stuff like that. So I've done maybe 10 of these now or something like that, and some of them are me doing demos and stuff like that. So there is like topics about a little bit of everything, like set dressing, portfolio. I've done one on just general blockout. I've done one on modularity, if I remember correctly. So you can just check that out on YouTube. Um, any other questions for anyone? I know that they asked me to, of course, link the course. So I'm going to do that. But like I said, questions doesn't have to be about the course. If anyone has like just general questions about anything, I'm happy to answer it. So that's the link to the bootcamp. We have like 10 minutes more, so just see if there is any last questions. But like I said, you can always type to me if you come up with it later, basically. One tricky thing with this project is that it was built in Maya, and I've kind of moved completely over to Blender now. So that's kind of like going to be a big time thing, is that I need to move all of this into Blender now. I think that's a little bit why I've been holding off on jumping back to it. But I of course worked in Maya kind of like from the start, so I'm happy to help if it's in Maya or Blender or oh, that's interesting question. I mean, there is always like those like moments where, for example, Hazelight reached out to me like a couple of years ago, and I said no then because I wanted to kind of like stay in the team. Like those moments you have a little bit like where maybe like if you took that path, like one big thing, and maybe I always kind of thought was like how would it be to work outside of Sweden. So that's more like career wise, like because what I'm happy with is that I did indie, 2A and AAA, so I tried everything and knowing what is for me and not. So I'm very happy about that. But maybe a unanswered question for me would be working in a different country. Like, and it's of course getting harder the older you get, basically. Like it's easier to do it a little bit when you are younger. And I was about to go to Canada. That was like the plan, but then that didn't become what it became basically. So I basically been in Stockholm, uh, which is like a great game development city. But of course, I think working in a different country, people usually say you learn a lot doing that, and then maybe going back to your own country after a while. Um, I would say maybe dare to ask. I would say dare to ask people about help also maybe. Like I talked a little bit about when I didn't release anything on ArtStation for the longest time. And the reason why I started to release at this point, because like I sat alone and worked. So I think finding community would be something I would try earlier. Because I found community, and meaning with community is like finding like-minded people and working with them, like other environment artists, finding a small core group that makes the time when it's hardest much easier. So like when you are having to sit a weekend to just figure out why some props are flickering in your other good scene, it's nice to do that and having kind of a community, like other people doing the same struggle, and leaning towards those a little bit instead of just kind of trying to solve it yourself. So that's always something I recommend. Is there is so many kind of 3D communities out there on Discord or Polycount, like the forum. So I think that, or game jams in general, like I think those are great to just find other game developers, or just find other artists. So I started to go to Drink and Draws a lot at this time also. I think that's also a little bit why the painting started a lot also. Going and drawing with other artists, maybe not even in the game industry, gave me a little bit of perspective of other artists struggling. And I maybe hope I did that a bit earlier. So I went through my whole university without maybe doing that. And then when I left university, I started doing that. So 3 years of university, and I didn't have a portfolio. And I was a little bit on the brink of like maybe this is not for me. But then I found that community, and I kind of posted my work in progress of this scene, and I got some thumbs ups and good praise, but also some feedback. And it was first time I experienced feedback, and someone kind of helping me trying to figure out like a project, so not doing it on your own. So this project actually looked like this before. So not that much difference, but there is some big aspect that kind of like help this to kind of like become finalized basically. Um, how do you deal with burnout on a project you are not happy with? Do you just move on to the next, or do you better knuckle up, down, and just get uploaded? Yeah, it's a great question. Like I think like I have both answers there. So of course I have so many graveyard projects that I can't even count them. But usually how I see like unfinished projects. But what I usually do, and I think I've done it after I did these two. I've done that since then. That I basically have like a couple of projects that I sometimes just let the rest if I don't have like an important reason to finish them. So for example, I have a bunch of these like unfinished projects that I might jump back to at some point. So I have like a supernatural scene, and this is like maybe 80% there. I have all the props from the show in the side of the car. The car is completed and everything, but I didn't feel it to finish it basically. Um, and I would say I would probably not recommend to do that when you not have a portfolio. I think it's important to just kind of like have a portfolio, and maybe also being in the industry that helps a little bit also. So all of these kind of been when I've been to the industry. So I had like my kind of two scenes to lean towards, and then I could like experiment a little bit. But then like a good example is like, for example, this project, that one I just knuckled up and just pushed through because Hazelight, I had a sense that it would open up a position, And I felt like I wanted something that was maybe a little bit more ZBrushy, a little bit more stylized to fit kind of their games a bit more vibrant. So I basically speed run this, and then like the role opened up, and I was not finished with it. So I basically like a week after I applied, I finished it, and then I just wrote to them, yeah, hi, I just finished this project and linked it to them basically. So that became a little bit of a knuckle down project basically. But this one I started like probably yeah you know like here, and then I did like a first version of it maybe here, and then 6 years later I was like okay, now I want to finish that. Um, but yeah, like I said, if you're starting out, I would probably try to knuckle up because I think there is like the great value of kind of going from start to finish with a project also. Without that, you don't know kind of like all the steps basically. And I think when you do that, it's much easier to do the next one. So there is a value of like getting to the finish line. Uh, do you mean like sell in terms of getting people to look at it? Because I've never earned money on specifically these scenes. So these have been more like portfolio work basically. And at least for me, like I've been asked to kind of put these on like 3D selling platforms, but for me, I've always said no to that because I think for me, I put so much kind of me inside of these. Like here we have Supernatural, but we have like my two cats. Like I wouldn't be comfortable selling these basically because they have so much of me inside of them. I feel like all of my personal project have so many kind of like Easter eggs that is for me and friends and family. Like, and they don't even know about them. But yeah, that's like for me, it's always been these have not been for selling. Like that's not been the purpose of creating them. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I was very obsessed with Last of Us at that time. Basically, I was. I mean, this one is even based on a concept from Last of Us, um, and this one I basically just found uh, a Google image that I liked and just built it in a bit more of a. So I'm not sure if I have the original picture here. Yeah, here. So I found this place and it looked very like fitting for like a Last of Us scene. And I would say that's also a thing. Like sometimes it takes so much time to kind of figure out when you want to build. But I would say like a lot of my project has just been me jumping on Pinterest um, and clicking around basically. So if I take you to a random city, and there is of course, this at some point it was like completely filled with AI, and I feel like then you don't get like the fun stuff. But there is an option in settings you can set to turn that off, and now it's not. Now it's less, but it's still a bit infested. But finding kind of like these things, and then eventually creating something out of it. Another thing I love to do is like a lot of my project has been me doing Google Maps and then asking a student to give me a city, and then we just drop down in that city basically and walk around until we find something interesting to build. So my Italian scene was created like that. So there was a student from Italy that gave Palermo as a city, and then we found this place in Italy. So this is a real place. And I was a game artist created a lot by this also. Like um so I think uh like this is a real place, this is a real place. So this one doesn't exist anymore. This is taken from um yeah, from this was destroyed 40 years ago in my hometown, and it's like most people that lived back then miss it, so I wanted to recreate it basically. So they made like an article because a lot of the old people in that town still miss this theater. So I wanted to kind of capture that because I've always heard my grandparents talking about it and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, and I would say like burnout. I just want to capture that burnout question because I think that's a important one. I think one thing is to one also, like I will always try to not create big projects only. I think that's also something that can really demotivate. So for me, it's been also like I see like some of these paintings are just sketches I do during a lunch break or something. Like that's a project for me also, and I think not always feeling like the pressure of creating this giant project. Of course, it doesn't have to be like it can be a 3D model, like maybe just like a we'll say like a block out could be a like a good kind of just break of not doing the same thing over and over again. But then also I think a thing I've always tried to remember myself, and it's not always I'm good at it, but I try to always remember myself to take pauses and stuff like that. So a good example I like to show is when I did this King Arthur scene. I had kind of like planned in my vacation, so that was kind of time boxed, and that kind of determined the time frame of the scene. And I think when I did art tests, like art test is usually over a weekend, then I time box basically every day, and I put in like an hour, go outside and walk like every day basically because you come back much more fresher in your mind and stuff like that. So I think breaking that pattern because I mean I'm very easily sitting and just doing art for for many hours. But if I have that kind of planned out, I would go out and just take that walk, maybe see a fun aspect, seeing something when I'm outside walking, and those things sometimes creeps into my scenes also. If that's like a yeah, like something happening outside or just realization how something would kind of look in reality, because it's very easy to just sit and being in your own bubble basically. So when it comes to like copyright, I think it's fairly fine. Like I would say even for like portfolio pieces, I would usually say people would call them more fan, like we know fan art, right? So I would say the only tricky thing is when, for example, I created this the Last of Us scene. I did this after the first game and tried to push it further. I would say like with feedback now, I would say the first game was like visually is above this, but the goal was to kind of like try to kind of get it to maybe like fidelity wise or modeling wise, getting it further. Uh, so the only thing I would be a bit careful is like if you create something and it's a current game, is that people will of course put you next to it. So if you create something from Last of Us 2 and it doesn't hold up next to it, then might be tricky. But I think also it's a very nice ladder to like or a way to kind of like try to aim for something. So something I did in the beginning that helped me a lot. And this was when I was alone and had nobody like giving me feedback and stuff like that. I always kind of put my stuff next to my aim in a similar kind of like if they had the same vibe basically. So this is of course Uncharted, but it's still Naughty Dog, and I just putting it next to this and just kind of like asking myself like, what do I need to do to get it closer? And doing that every day, I did basically, and that helped me a lot. But I would say you don't have to be, as long as you're not selling it, you don't have to be worried about copyright. When it comes to like just pure portfolio work, I would say. Uh, we have run a little bit over, but I'm going to ask a last time. There is maybe always a last question there. If anyone has like some last questions, or else we will slowly wrap up for today. And like I said, just feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or ArtStation. I can link my ArtStation maybe. And my LinkedIn, like clicking here if you prefer writing there. So it's like here. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in and staying for the time. Um, I wish everyone a nice rest of the week. And I mean, I do these live streams like by monthly basically. So I will be back probably like in what would be not September, it would be October basically. And then we will be basically a little bit more of me doing something. I think for the next live stream, it's probably going to be because I'm going back to my project, so it's probably going to be maybe something about this project, basically. Maybe I do a demo of me working on it or something like that in a live stream. But yeah, with that being said, um, have a nice rest of the week, and I see you all. Bye bye.